So I'm finally going to do that video on choosing life just because things have gotten so bad. Even someone made a threat today and said, quote unquote, Israel will be destroyed. Clearly, that's not choosing life. That's choosing death. And of course, that's making an anti-Semitic threat. And so let's see what choosing life is about, especially because the theme in the Bible, I think, that points to the third greatest mitzvah is, choosing life. So the translation reads, just a translation of the phrase, uvacharta bachaim. So, and, choose to be in life. Choose life. And the theme of life is just throughout the entire Bible, whether you're, well, whoever you are, whether you identify as Jewish or Messianic Jewish or as a Gentile Christian, or whether you're Buddhist or whoever or whatever you identify as. And let's see, even this is kind of ironic for they call themselves Temple Betham, and yet, unfortunately, because I was Googling the Choose Life translation to see what the phrase was in Hebrew, since I did not know that I'm Jewish, and I kind of find this sermon ironic for a Reform rabbi. And he says this was his Yizkor sermon for Sukkot 2012. So the Jewish year 5771. By the way, I know I'm going to get crap for it because I don't follow the rabbinical calendar. I follow the Karaite one, but oh well. He says, we have come here because we are concerned with death. We have lost someone that we love, and we have come here to remember. Yet we must never lose sight of the fact that as people in a religion, we are most concerned with life. Unless one is mentally or emotionally disturbed, there is no stronger urge in the heart of any human being than the will to live. Probably most of you are aware that according to tradition, if one commits the heinous crimes of suicide, he is not allowed to be buried in the Jewish cemetery. Rather, the service and interment take place on the very outskirts of the cemetery, because the rabbis consider the destruction of human life taken by an individual against himself be one of the gravest sins. And so, of course, he's talking about tradition and what have you. And also, ironically, though, Reform Judaism is totally okay with eugenics, and I had remembered this because, unfortunately, someone had tweeted recently that an atheist said that children with Down syndrome and genetic conditions along those lines should be aborted, and there was outrage. But of course, I'm sitting there going, well, unfortunately, that's been, ironically, the position of mainstream, aka Reform Judaism, for a long time, so this isn't something that's new. And by the way, one of the accusations against the Reform Jewish movement is that many Reform Jews are atheists. And by the way, I promise you this is what is unfortunately in Reform Judaism, and I would ask anyone who is a Reform Jew to really reconsider their position. And I'm going to begin with what verse is cited here. Reform Judaism understands the original position of the Talmud, wherein is described a notion that an abortion should be performed only for the sake of the life of the mother, and even as late as the moment before the head of a baby emerges from the birth canal. However, Reform goes beyond this narrowly defined period and gives sanctions to its members, and all others for that matter, to elect to terminate a pregnancy when confronting other circumstances. And I'm going to stop right there and read the verse that he's talking about for a minute, and it is pretty upsetting, and it goes to show the irony of when Torah says to choose life, how the rabbis tried to circumvent that. And it says, if a woman is in hard travail, one cuts up the child in her womb and brings it forth member by member, because her life comes before that of it. But if the greater part has proceeded forth, one may not touch it, for one may not set aside one person's life for that of another. But they're already murdering the child within the womb, and that sounds like partial birth abortion to me. And here's let's see, even this one. Let's go up to Mishnah 5 for a second. This is referring to the birth of twins. If the first proceeded forth dead and the second alive, the one that's alive is clean. If the first was alive and the second dead, the living child is unclean. Rabbi Meir says, if they were in one membrane, the live child is unclean, but if there were two membranes, it remains clean. Let's see, if they were in one membrane, let's see, so I'm not exactly sure about that, but it looks like identical twins. I'm going to go check the footnotes real quick. So let's see, in the theory that okay, since on the I'm not exactly sure. I don't know if it's exactly referring to identical twins or Siamese twins or whatever kind of twins, but the point is, so frankly, had my dad been openly Jewish and openly following the Talmud, my sister and I never would have made it, or one of us would have never made it. And I mean, that's just scary to think about it. Okay, so you've seen that, unfortunately, the Talmud tries to one-up the Torah on this, and it gets even worse within Reform Judaism, and people are so outraged by this atheist saying that, oh, kids with Down syndrome should be aborted. But like I said, unfortunately, that's been the mainstream position in Judaism for a long time, and statistically, most Jews in the U.S. and Canada are Reform. See, here it is. Let's see, it says, however, Reform Judaism goes beyond this narrowly defined period and gives sanctions to its members, and all others for that matter, to elect to terminate a pregnancy when confronting other circumstances. As a result of rape or incest, when through genetic testing it is determined that the child will be born, will have a disease that will cause death or severe disability, and the parents believe that the impending death will be an impossible situation for them and other circumstances. The Reform perspective on abortion can be described as follows. Abortion is an extremely difficult choice faced by a woman in all circumstances. It should be her decision whether or not to terminate a pregnancy, backed up by those whom she trusts, physician, therapist, partner, etc. This decision should not be taken lightly. Abortion should never be used for birth control purposes and can have lifelong ramifications. However, any decision should be left up to the woman within whose body the fetus is growing. Reform Judaism might also say that pregnancy prevention is an important value, as well as sexuality education in appropriate setting and with appropriate materials. It would be infinitely better to prevent teen and other pregnancy through contraception than to face births by teenage parents or others who cannot take care of a child. Well, regardless of that, Torah says to choose life, and also that aborting a child just because of a disease that will cause death or severe disability and other circumstances. So, I mean, I'm not severely disabled. I will say, though, that had my mom and dad been practicing Reform Judaism, and I've always said that my dad would be Reform if he were honest with himself, but can you imagine if he'd gone the way that great-granddad's parents were originally practicing? And great-great-grandma came from a pretty orthodox family, let me put it that way. We would have been, at least I would have been dead, because they said that I'd never be able to talk, walk, write. I would have to use a computer, if anything. So, and also, let's see, it would be infinitely better to prevent teen and other pregnancy through contraception than to face births by teenage parents or others who cannot take care of a child. Okay, so the birth control issue is fine. However, abortion is not. And what about those, and it talks about, or others who cannot take care of a child. What about adoption? And speaking of adoption, I have a cousin who has a Guatemalan biological mother. The mother could have, speaking of life, put her child's life in danger, crossed the border illegally, decided not to do that. decided to give up her child for adoption, and now he's my fourth cousin. So that's a case of choosing life outside of the womb. And so, I mean, people say, well, what if the parents can't take care of the child or this or this or this? Well, you know, unless I'm wrong, adoption is a mitzvah. As the old saying goes, adoption, not abortion. And so there's that. And I mean, even just within, my whole point is, even within mainstream thought, even within mainstream Jewish, and even thus mainstream Judeo-Christian thought, there is a go-ahead for abortion. And by the way, of course, with the disclaimer that says abortion should never be used for birth control purposes. Well, isn't aborting a child because of a disease or any other circumstance birth control / eugenics? And so, I mean, it's clear that within the culture and within the faith that gave Judeo-Christian values, there is a culture of death and darkness, and even, you know, the stubborn refusals to make aliyah by those who can. Let's look at that even. And that gives a theme on life. And again, there's so many themes about life and death in the Bible, and just life in, I mean, like I said, it's one of the mainstream, or one of the main themes in the Bible. So we're talking about Jeremiah 8. Even in like I said, even in issues today, I'm gonna have to, there we go. At that time, saith Jehovah, they shall bring out the bones of the kings of Judah, and the bones of his princes, and the bones of the priests, and the bones of the prophets, and the bones of the inhabitants of Jerusalem out of their graves, and they shall spread them before the sun and the moon, and all the host of heaven, whom they have loved, and whom they have served, and after whom they have walked, and whom they have sought, and whom they have worshipped. They shall not be gathered, nor be buried. They shall be for dung upon the face of the earth. And death shall be chosen rather than life by all the residue that remain of this evil family that remain in all the places where I have driven them, says Jehovah Zevot. So, I mean, even in matters where we wouldn't think that life is involved, from, you know, the issue of abortion or adoption, from the issue of aliyah. So, I mean, even throughout things that we would have never thought or never foreseen, there's the issue of life. And then what do you do about, for example, when, you know, war is threatening every day? And I mean, we're already in the war on terror, and now we're deciding to get involved in war with ISIS when we're already fighting a general war on terror, and we're not being responsible. We're not being good stewards. We're already overstretching the U.S. military economically. Well, yeah, we're overstretching the military economically, and we're overstretching the whole U.S. economy, and then, of course, we're overstretching the U.S. militarily, so we're putting ourselves at risk. We're not being good stewards. And so, I mean, even in matters where you would expect that, you know, you wouldn't really have to think about as much of a life or death thing, but just the themes of life and death apply to every situation, and you can almost find the themes of life and death that are throughout the Bible, like I said, applying to everything that we know today, from the abortion adoption issue to aliyah, to do we play into ISIS's hands and risk more lives? So, I mean, it's a constant theme. And even at the beginning, even, for lack of a better term, even in terms of how we got into this mess, we begin and go back to the first book of the Bible, which is Genesis, and it talks about life and death just within the first chapters. Okay, so of course we see that God created everything, and then we go to Genesis 2. It talks about how man and woman were created, and within the first 3 chapters of Genesis, it goes right into the themes of life and death. It's right from the whole fall begins with the theme of life and death, like not even just thinking about, oh, what just happened, but it's automatically just life and death. It says, okay, so of course now we see the first verses, but then it talks about where Adam and Eve did decide to eat the apple, and of course they hid. They knew they were in trouble, but they weren't thinking about like, whoa, what just happened? Whoa, what do we do? It was like they knew they were screwed, so they were trying to hide from God, and it was like automatically life or death. And even God first says to and God first talks to the serpent, and I mean the animals were created first anyway, so just think about that. Because thou hast done this, cursed art thou from among all cattle and from among all the beasts of the field. Upon thy belly shalt thou go, and dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life, and I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. They shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise their heel. And so, of course, right away, the life of all the creation that humans were supposed to have dominion over is affected. And let's see, and it says, unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy pain and thy travail. In pain thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. So even in bringing life forward now, I mean, it almost sounds like, I mean, a lot of times when women do go into labor, they say, heck, this hurts, and man, I wish I were dead. And then suddenly when that kid's born, they suddenly are like, okay, I can live through this, I'm over the labor pain now, and I just brought life forth. But I mean, like, so automatically every life is now affected. And it does say too that Eve's going to become the mother of all living. And to Adam he says, he said, because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree of which I commanded thee, saying, thou shalt not eat it. Cursed is the ground for thy sake, in toil shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life. Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return unto the ground, for out of it wast thou taken. For dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return. And even it talks about like where the garments of skins, so clearly animals had to be killed. So right within just the first 3 chapters of Genesis, and just, as we could see how the whole history of the world began, the theme of life and death was just woven right in, and the clear choice would have been life. And especially in this day and age where there's a culture of death and darkness and wanting to get in all kinds of wars and conflicts and other just unbelievable stuff, when we've already stretched ourselves in a lot of cases to the point of death. For example, if we play into ISIS's hands and we continue to overstretch ourselves militarily and economically, where if we continue to abort children instead of having these kids given up for adoption, and perhaps even, because a lot of people talk about the decline of the Western birth rate and just so many things. And so, I mean, just think about all that stuff, and even the issue of aliyah, that definitely involves a life or death thing. And so, I mean, just throughout, even the beginning of the world, the theme of life and death was intertwined. And now in our day and age especially, the theme of life and death is there. So this is really something to think about, especially as we do confront the issues today, and we are indeed in a time of Jacob's trouble. And so again, it goes back to the whole deal of choose life that you and your descendants may live. The whole shtick about, like I said, and as I quoted the translation, uvacharta bachaim, and choose life or choose to be in life. And the whole point of that was basically, it even says, to choose life that you and your descendants may live. And so the point is, especially in this day and age, we gotta choose life, because if you think it was bad for Adam and Eve, it's gonna be worse for us if we don't choose life. And that's just that.